Now, over the course of this pandemic-induced lockdown, Netflix has been an absolute saviour in terms of being able to release a backlog of consistently watchable films. And in commemoration of that seemingly unstoppable force of film distribution, I want to pick Netflix's top 10 films and analyse just what it is that makes them stand out from the rest of their archive. So my number 10 is Triple Frontier, and this is on here because for me it's just great action escapism, and I don't think Netflix does many of these too successfully. Now, it doesn't quite tackle the themes of greed and addiction to a military life with as much depth as it thinks it does, but it's a great action film nonetheless. It's about 4 military veterans go off the books to rob a big cartel boss, and it brings together a great cast. The shootout scenes are rehearsed with a believable sense of military precision, and Ben Affleck anchors the film with a heightened sense of desperation and moral ambiguity. The "how far will you go" trope has been addressed in many a film, and I don't think it's necessarily reinvented or mastered here. But the material is in the hands of these very great, versatile actors, and as a group dynamic, they're always very fun to watch. The Fundamentals of Caring is a beautifully underwatched film and was one of Netflix's first original productions. Paul Rudd and Craig Roberts absolutely kill it as two hopeless individuals, rediscovering a passion for life through each other's struggles. It manages to balance dark, pessimistic comedy with a joyous sense of optimism, and really evolved the teen illness drama subgenre that became popular with films like Fault in Our Stars, Everything Everything, Me Before You, and 5 Feet Apart. I didn't go for the obvious feels of a romance story, but instead the more complex relationship between adulthood and adolescence, with two characters who find a sense of comfort in each other's nihilism. It's a really good road trip comedy that isn't afraid to lay on some heavy emotion either. Mowgli Legend of the Jungle is hugely under-acknowledged and in my opinion surpasses both Jon Favreau's 2016 Jungle Book and last year's Lion King. Rejecting the musical nature of the Disney story and opting for a far more visceral approach to the classic Jungle Book tale, Andy Serkis flexes his motion capture repertoire, bringing together an elite cast including Christian Bale, Cate Blanchett and Benedict Cumberbatch. This darker portrayal feels not only refreshing but organic, providing some tense and unexpectedly bloody animosity. It's miles away from the Disney version, and that maturity allows it to tackle the harsh realities of the jungle and the human involvement with a surprising sincerity. It's like watching a David Attenborough documentary if the animals could talk, striking a balance between these moments of, protectiveness and heartfelt playfulness, mixed with the daily threats to their own survival. I love Roma. It's one of those films that you start watching and you instantly know it's artistry. You know that saying of life imitating art and art imitating life? Well, Roma is the type of film that beautifully blurs that mix, feeling like a very honest reflection of class and social restraint, while also delving into the happiness and joy that can be celebrated anywhere. Visually and culturally, it has a lot to say, and knowing that Alfonso Cuarón channels a lot of personal history into the narrative resonates with the confident sense of quiet identity being expressed. It's very indescribable as a film and reminded me a bit of Federico Fellini's La Dolce Vita, a story about the ordinary told with an underlying sense of the extraordinary. Beasts of No Nation was the first film that Netflix bought the global distribution rights for, a harrowing story of civil war in an unspecified African country, told from the perspective of a young boy called Agu, as he becomes indoctrinated into this regime of child soldiers and ever so slowly exposed to the morally grey world of authority and corruption. Idris Elba was the big name draw to the film, playing a character who gives off heavy Captain Ahab vibes, or Colonel Kurtz from Heart of Darkness, Apocalypse Now. This guy who is so self-absorbed in his cause that he becomes lost to his own humanity. But Beasts of No Nation is ultimately owned by Abraham Atta, one of the greatest child actors I think I've ever seen, bringing such a nuanced and suppressed performance that compels you constantly. It's told with an unflinching demand to show the horrors of an impressionable child forced into manhood before he's ready. For me, I don't think any Scorsese film is going to top Wolf of Wall Street, but The Irishman is an incredible retrospective tale, taking us through the life of Robert De Niro's hitman and his complicated relationship with Al Pacino's Jimmy Hoffa. This chemistry, much like the tone of the film, is nostalgic, and Pacino and De Niro are never anything less than magnetic together, replacing their cops and robbers opposition from Heat for a dynamic based more on friendship and the true values of loyalty. Throw Joe Pesci into the mix and the film just oozes something classical, like you're watching a bygone era of filmmaking, willing to take its time and immerse you in the lives and complexities of each character. 3 hours is naturally a strain on any narrative, but a film with 3 acting heavyweights who have all become famous for mastering the gangster epic doesn't come around all that often, and you're just grateful for every minute of it that you get. Okja is Bong Joon-ho's second globally mainstream film, following the excellent Snowpiercer and released before the award-winning Parasite, exploring the ethics of the animal farming industry and genetic modification through a fictional species of super pig. It's a charming film with the relationship between a girl and her pet at the centre of all the ethical and political issues being targeted, and as with Parasite and Snowpiercer, Okja juggles a very unique tone. Sometimes feeling like a fast action adventure, at others feeling like a comedy, but always full of this underlying heartfelt endearment that elevates it into something more spiritual and contemplative. Marriage Story is just a beautiful piece of filmmaking all round. The characters are raw and totally sympathetic, and its decision to not take sides makes it a very difficult watch at times, but never anything less than engrossing. The fact that it was shot on film as opposed to digital gives it that domestic feel of a home video, but also this warm gloss over the visual aesthetic. And the aspect ratio feeds the overwhelming sense of claustrophobia that these characters feel in each other's presence. Like Roma, it captures the realistic, with Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson absolutely devastating as the 2 leads. I really knew nothing about Annihilation going in, beyond the fact that it was a science fiction film, but my god, it's so much more than that. It's part psychological thriller, part horror, part sci-fi, but all round brilliant. Natalie Portman, in my opinion, gives one of the best performances of her career and is a phenomenal lead, playing a war veteran on a mission to infiltrate this force field and find out what's at its centre in an effort to ultimately discover what happened to her husband. The mystery isn't so much trying to be revelatory or jaw-dropping, but deliberately used to explore themes of self-discovery, self-destruction, and ultimately what constitutes our very sense of selfhood. There's a lot of scientific philosophy at play in this narrative, and to be honest, you'd expect nothing less from the director of Ex Machina. This is a thought-provoking masterpiece delving into the meaning of existence and reframing our own understanding of life. Outlaw King is just downright my favourite film on Netflix. I'm not even afraid to say it. It's definitely not the most innovative piece of filmmaking out of these top 10, or the best told story, or even filled with great characterisation. But for me, what it does is revive a genre that has been all too absent over the last decade, and that is the historical epic. Following Braveheart in 1995, the early 2000s were rife with these huge epic productions. We had Gladiator, Troy, Alexander the Great, Last Samurai, Kingdom of Heaven, The Patriot. But ever since then, they've kind of been a dying breed, and Outlaw King goes a long way to remedy that. It charts a similar narrative to Braveheart in terms of striving for Scottish independence and liberation from the English crown, but this time we see the rebellion from the perspective of Robert the Bruce, played with great reservation and noble responsibility by Chris Pine. What elevates this film for me is the battle sequences. The final battle is in my top 3 of all time. It takes the squalor and the chaos of Game of Thrones' Battle of the Bastards and just does it better. It feels dirty, gritty, realistic. It's not glamorized or gratuitous. The choreography is just phenomenally brutal, and the underdog tale of few fighting against many doesn't suspend belief, but instead shows great handling of set pieces and visual framing to make the encounter strategically viable. It's a really fast film. The pace is incredibly well balanced by these frequent action scenes that at times threaten to feel too recurring, but they help to add to the nomadic nature of Robert's journey, a character who is constantly under threat and constantly on the run and can never be safe. Supported with a great performance by Aaron Taylor-Johnson as a berserk Scotsman striving to right the wrongs done to his family, I will not get tired of this film. It just reignites my love of the genre, and those sweeping landscape shots beautifully emphasise the scale of the production, as well as that national independence at stake. So that is my top 10 Netflix recommendations. Obviously I haven't binged through every Netflix original, but of the fair few that I have blitzed through, this is probably my god tier selection. So if you do end up checking out any of the films that I've suggested, please be sure to let me know what you guys thought. Or better yet, if you have your own disagreements or your own preferences, then I'd love to hear your recommendations. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. And in the meantime, have a great day. Thank you guys.